Coming to you from Orange County, California, this is the Jugglife podcast with Max Ada and Chad Wesley Smith. Hey everybody, what is up? Chad Wesley Smith here, bringing you another episode of the Jugglife podcast. I'm joined as always by Mountie Max Montana. And Max, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. How you guys doing out there in podcast land?
So we are in Calgary, Canada, up here for IPF Classic Worlds. Both Joanne and Marissa are competing. Max and I are just here as eye candy.
Yeah.
And while they do the real work. And today's episode is brought to you by Poutine and Push-Ups. It's a lifestyle. And also brought to you by Purple Mattresses. Anyone who trains hard knows the importance of a good night's sleep. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to wake up groggy, not recovered as well, just not be as productive in your job, not get as quality at training, not be making quite those same gains. But with their scientifically designed mattresses, Purple Mattress is bringing you better sleep through science, and you can check them out at purple.com/Jugglife. So we took a bunch of Q&As, or I guess questions, on Instagram, and I'm going to be answering those for you today, so let's just go ahead and jump right into it. The first question was it's kind of the same topic touched on by several people, including Bubble Tea and Bench Press and Dead Outlaw. And Bubble Tea and Bench Press, it's a lifestyle, asked about swimming for cardio and if it's more useful because of less stress on the joints. And obviously, powerlifters are maybe getting beat up a little bit. Powerlifters, weightlifters, strongmen getting beat up a little bit already because of all the hard training they do. So is swimming a good idea to include? And it definitely could be. I mean, the buoyancy of the water is going to provide some benefit, but if you're not a very good swimmer, it's probably not going to be a great choice. And the repetitive nature of swimming, if your shoulders are getting beat up from bench pressing, it might just be exacerbating that problem. But the idea of training in water can definitely be useful. And I'd suggest you check out doing tempo work in the water. This would be a bit of a Charlie Francis idea. So you'd want to go in water about waist deep and do kind of high knees in the water at 70-ish% effort. You could do those for either a set number of foot contacts, like 100 foot contacts, or time intervals, usually 30 to 40 seconds would be appropriate. And then you'd rest the remainder of the minute. Or if you have a bit better fitness levels, you could go 30 seconds of push-ups, hop out of the water, 30 seconds of running in place in the water, hop out, do 10 to 20 push-ups or some abs, and then back in and go again. Just looking to elevate the heart rate, to stay alactic, and it's going to be easier on the body doing that type of drill in water rather than it would be, jogging or doing interval type of sprints on land or on a treadmill. So to piggyback off of that, Dead Outlaw asked about how to incorporate conditioning for powerlifters. So the water tempos could be one good option. Tempo work in general is my preferred method there because it's going to help the lifter stay out of a lactic state, which maybe you could run into some problems, especially considering the timing that you're doing this compared to competition, of some transitional fiber, fast twitch to slow twitch type of stuff, or just generating more fatigue. So when you see people like pushing the prowler until they throw up, that's not something that's going to be beneficial to a strength athlete, really at any time, but particularly not 6-8 weeks out from a meet. It's just generating a lot more fatigue. So can the prowler be used effectively, and can it be used in a tempo type of setting? Definitely. The same way we talked about the water tempos, you could push or pull a sled for 30 to 50 yards at a quick pace, not a sprint, but about 65 to 80% of your maximum speed. Stop, do 10 push-ups or 20 band pull-aparts or some abs, plank, something like that. Wait until your heart rate comes back down a little bit and go again. Doing tempos in that type of format, whether maybe start at 2 sets of 6 intervals like that, and then the next week 2 sets of 8, and then 2 sets of 10. And because the sport of powerlifting doesn't really have an aerobic component to it, if you're doing 2 sets of 10 and just staying consistent there, that's going to help you with everything that you need in regards to powerlifting. Your general work capacity will be higher. It'll promote some recovery, help with weight management and body composition, all that good stuff, without detracting from your recovery capacity too much. Now, if you want to include a little bit harder type of conditioning because that's fun for you, more power to you. Go for it. Things like farmer's walk or yoke, tire flips, front-loaded carries with a keg or a sandbag, those can all be really useful. The EMOM type of format, I think, is great with that. So if you're doing 75% or like a 7 RPE type of feel on a farmer's walk for maybe 20 to 30 yards, 6 to 10 minute EMOM of that. So you start at 0, however long it takes you to walk those 30 yards, drop them, rest to the start of the next minute, go again. I talk about that type of stuff a lot more in my Beers with Chad episode number 12, my biggest powerlifting mistake. And I do think that type of training, very general training, whether it's swimming or strongman or CrossFit or rowing or playing basketball or whatever you enjoy doing, has a very useful place in a great scientific, long-term sustainable training plan. It's going to catch up to you eventually if you're going from one meet training cycle right into the next one, right into the next one. It's either going to catch up to you physically or mentally. So including 3 to 8 weeks of very general fun training that's still going to have some work capacity and coordination benefit is definitely a good call. So check that episode out. That's Beers with Chad number 12, my biggest powerlifting mistake. And Beers with Chad is just a bonus episode to the Jugglife, so you can find it in our regular podcast feed, as well as most of them on YouTube. So the next question comes from Saka Flaka, and he asks about complexes for weightlifting. That he doesn't see the Juggernaut lifters doing very many complexes, while he sees other people doing them. So, Max, what are complexes? What are they good for? And how and when would you include them?
So you probably don't see a lot of the Juggernaut girls or the Juggernaut team doing a whole lot of complexes. And generally, I think what most people's perception of a complex are going to be like 2 to 3 different movements linked together. So like a snatch pull, a snatch, and then an overhead squat. That's the most traditional sort of sense of a complex. Whereas really a complex is just any different exercises that have some similar or some component that's similar. So like a snatch and an overhead squat combined is a complex. These are exercises that are well suited to like the early phases of training, the general phase, because they're your transference from doing 3 or 4 different movements to the actual result of a snatch is pretty low. You're also working with lower intensities, and to some degree, if you have enough exercises in the actual complex, you may even get away from the energy system. That would be like sometimes you see in CrossFit, there's that one, there's like a bear complex. There's like 7 different movements. It takes 45 seconds to complete the thing.
What about the ADA complex?
Oh, yeah.
Back squat to front squat to deadlift.
The famous ADA complex, yes. Never done again by anyone else. So...
What we're talking about ADA complex was for an exhibition, Max did a 500-pound back squat, 500-pound front squat, 500-pound deadlift.
Yeah.
All same bar, just back squat, racked it, front squat, dropped it, deadlift.
Yeah. I think the whole thing took about 18 seconds.
Yeah, it wasn't fast enough for the Instagram of the day.
See, back in the day, Instagram, it was a lot harder, right? We had it much harder than you guys do today. But anyways, complexes are really a great way to develop some general conditioning, general endurance for the lifts early on in the training cycle. The GPP phase, the kind of early phases, some hypertrophy work, it's beneficial in that regard. But you're not going to see a lot of us do complexes simply because most of the lifters on the team don't fall into a category where these long-winded, multiple different variations in one movement are going to benefit them. I can think of a couple of people on the team. Kiana is a good example where doing multiple different exercises is probably not going to facilitate learning the lifts better and helping her to refine the technique of, say, the snatch or the clean, simply because her experience level is relatively low. And doing different movements is going to break down that technique and just make it more difficult for her to focus on that one or two little corrections she needs to make. I think complexes are fine. There's nothing against them. It's just that they really don't serve a purpose beyond that early phase. You're not going to do a lot of combining different exercises as you get close to a meet. And most of our girls, most of our lifters are already in a place where they have to just learn the basic technique and refine that, and then carry it on through to through the rest of the training cycle. I would say that complexes are well suited to people who have really stable technique. If you're somebody like, for example, Alex LaChance, if you're somebody whose technique doesn't degrade much during training, during fatigue, you can certainly incorporate more of those exercises. I know Anthony Pomponio used to do a lot of stuff at the OTC where he'd do like a clean pull, a clean, a front squat, and then a jerk. And at the time, his technique was very stable. It wouldn't break down under those conditions, and it's a great way to overload or to add, some overload to the pull and the squat, the sort of strength portions of the lift for him, and that was really beneficial. So, my guidelines would be make an assessment of how stable your technique is, make an assessment as to whether or not really changing that many variations or that many variables in one repetition is worthwhile to developing new technique or to help augment your strength training already, and then make a judgment there, use that, decide if you're going to use that complex or not.
So a real common complex that I see people including, Max, and it seems like they're doing this in an effort to improve the jerk, would be like a clean plus front squat or plus 2 front squats and then jerk. What would be the rationale behind that, and do you think it's actually useful?
Yeah, so the main rationale behind that, I think, is to build the endurance, to build like a general endurance for doing jerks when you're very tired. One clean, one front squat, one jerk. You can take a lighter weight that you can be more technically proficient in the jerk with and sort of pre-exhaust yourself a little bit with that front squat, therefore making you feel more similar to what it's like when you do a really hard clean before a jerk. So you end up in a position where you're standing up with kind of tired legs. It's important to be good and proficient in the jerk when you are or after a really hard clean, because a lot of times you're not going to have easy cleans in competition or with maximum weights. So as a general thing to help fix that in the jerk, it's a good complex. The other side, you could say it's a little bit beneficial, or it's used beneficially to sort of strengthen the legs somewhat, but those loads are not going to be huge. You're not going to be able to clean a weight and then make your legs stronger with 1 rep of front squat, but it does have some role in that, obviously.
So in general, you think that there's kind of some complexes that are maybe more just for Instagram show, like a 3-position clean or 3-position snatch.
Yeah, there's a lot of complexes I think people do. For a while there, I want to say a couple of years ago, I think Klokov probably initiated this. There was like everybody was doing shit like they would just combine like 5 or 6 things, or just weird complexes. And if you look at it and you just kind of step back and say, okay, you're doing like a snatch, then lowering the bar to your shoulders, then do a snatch grip push press, then do a drop snatch, then lower it again and do a hang snatch or something. It's like you have so many things going on that Yeah, sure, it's challenging, and it is a test of your willpower and a test of sort of general kind of toughness and strength. But is it really developing anything at a high level? Not really. I think there's definitely a use for, or there's definitely a trend, or was, to do these complexes that are just kind of stupid.
I think the British John North is trying to bring a lot of those
Yeah.
back, I think.
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of just weird shit, combining everything and, whatever. Some people just do that for fun and training. I mean, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, so I think the main takeaway there is if you're just putting exercises together for the sake of looking cool on Instagram, that's probably not a good, useful complex. But if you can, at least give a well thought out reason to something that complex is forcing you to improve on it, and that you're adding pulls before the first clean or snatch because you're weak in that area, then maybe it's a good thing to include. So just like anything, think critically about it. Don't just do it because you saw someone on Instagram doing it, but make sure it's a good fit for you. So we're going to take a quick break and then come back with some more questions about training for jiu-jitsu and what we feel makes a good coach and some of the people who we feel are top coaches in powerlifting and weightlifting today. Sleep is important. The quality of your sleep affects the quality of your daily life. You know that if you've had a bad night's sleep, you wake up angry, low on energy, and that's going to affect you throughout the day. It's going to make you less productive at work, have less effective training sessions, just have you in a bad mood all day. So if you're struggling to get a good night's sleep, you've got to try a Purple mattress. Purple mattress will probably feel different than anything you've ever experienced because it uses their brand new material that was developed by an actual rocket scientist, not like the memory foam that you may be used to. The Purple material feels very unique because it's both firm and soft at the same time, so it keeps everything supported while still feeling really comfortable. Plus, it's breathable, so it sleeps nice and cool. You can get a 100-night risk-free trial, and if you're not fully satisfied, you can return your mattress for a full refund, backed by a 10-year warranty, free shipping and returns, plus free in-home setup and old mattress removal. You're going to love Purple, and right now our listeners get free sheets and a free mattress protector with your mattress purchase. Just go to purple.com/Jugglife. That's purple.com/Jugglife. purple.com/Jugglife. All right, so we are back. Thanks to Purple Mattresses and purple.com for supporting the Jugglife. The next question, and I've been getting this in a lot of different iterations, is about how to train for jiu-jitsu. And I'm by no means an expert jiu-jitsu practitioner, but I do have a lot of experience doing the physical preparation coaching for some of the best jiu-jitsu athletes in the world. Romulo Barral, Felipe Pena, Octavio Sousa, a lot of athletes like that. And if you want to go and find it on Google, and you can, I don't sell it anymore, but you could illegally download it. Go ahead, you have my blessing to do that. Or if you just message me, I'll even send it to you. Is the Jiu-Jitsu Physical Preparation Manual, which is something I wrote back at that time, and you could check out. Also, I talk about this more in depth, considering it's a whole podcast about it, on Beers with Chad number 10, CWS and BJJ. A little bit about what I've been doing there. So, if you're training for competitive jiu-jitsu and that is your main goal, that's what I'm going to talk about here, rather than how do I combine jiu-jitsu and powerlifting, or jiu-jitsu and weightlifting, or jiu-jitsu and strongman. That's a different discussion and a bit beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about here. But if you're just training for competitive jiu-jitsu, your first priority has to be rolling. Drills and live training. That's the sport practice. That's the only thing that's irreplaceable. I'm a perfect example that being really strong, it can help, but it doesn't make you the best at jiu-jitsu by any stretch. So you have to train with principle number one, specificity. Beyond that, like sprints, jumps, and throws, whether you're throwing med ball or shot puts or whatever, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. You're going to be more explosive, more powerful, just a more athletic person, and particularly be mindful in the throws to focus on rotational patterns. There's a lot of rotational movement in jiu-jitsu, and having that rotational power is going to be hugely beneficial. Now, in general, for sport training, I'm always advocating for sprints, jumps, and throws. The manner in which you do them, the distances you're covering, the positions you're starting from, that's going to be a bit specific to the sport. For jiu-jitsu, doing things like starting a sprint from laying on your stomach or laying on your back or in a half kneeling position facing one way or the other, those can all be beneficial. Doing just normal jumps like a box jump or multiple jumps for distance can be useful. Adding a rotational element to the jumps can be beneficial as well. But then as we look at exercises in the gym, there's pretty much four categories that any athlete is going to primarily focus on. And those are squatting, upper body pressing, upper body pulling, and hip extension movements. And I talk about those as movement categories rather than specific exercises, because different sports are going to have different demands, and different athletes are going to have preparedness and the stability and mobility and everything to do different movements within those categories. So, for football players, which is where I've done a lot of my coaching, there I normally prioritize squatting, then pressing, then hip extension, then upper body pulling. But for jiu-jitsu, I would say your number one priority there should be the hip extension exercises, followed by upper body pulling, and then pressing and squatting are kind of tied for third place. Depending on your preparedness, your hip extension exercises, those could be Olympic lifting derivatives. It could be deadlifts, whether that's a straight bar or sumo, trap bar, deadlifts from blocks. All of those could be useful. Barbell glute bridge, hip thrust type of exercises. Those are also going to be very useful. Which ones you choose in that is going to be kind of what you're ready for, and I'll talk a bit more about exercise selection in a minute. I think some upper body pulling exercises that are going to be particularly beneficial are bent over rows, and then any kind of pull up and chin up variation. The bent over row is a position that you're going to find yourself as you're trying to pass someone's guard. A pretty similar body position a lot of times. It's going to make your back strong. It's going to build some isometric strength in the posture there, and the isometric strength is hugely beneficial for jiu-jitsu. You could get into doing stuff like, maybe 5 bent over rows, hold the 5th rep for 5 to 10 seconds, then do 5 more, and then hold the 10th rep, that type of thing, to build that isometric strength. For the pull-ups and chin-ups, you could hold at the top, you could hold halfway down, and you're going to get benefit from that. Plus, it's going to challenge the grip, and of course, grip strength is hugely important there. For pressing, because the shoulders are going to get beat up so much in jiu-jitsu, utilizing neutral grips when you're pressing could be beneficial. So you could do that by using dumbbells and just turning your palms in. Or if you have access to something like a Swiss bar, that can be useful. Unilateral pressing, so single arm dumbbell pressing or alternating dumbbell pressing could be a useful tool as well. In regards to squatting, I think that the hip extension, like deadlift variations, probably have a bit higher carryover to success in jiu-jitsu. More so than the squat does, but squatting and having powerful quads and hips and glutes, that's going to be useful for sure. Because there's so many tough positions in jiu-jitsu, particularly when you're playing from the bottom and you're a guard player, a lot of deep flexion, deep flexion and rotation together. The low back gets a lot of stress. So the belt squat's probably a great option there. Front squatting probably could be a high priority, and then different types of unilateral movements, split squats, step ups, lunges, even lateral like side lunge type of movements to develop mobility and stability in the hip can be great. Beyond that, developing aerobic capacity with similar type of stuff that we talked about for the powerlifters in regards to tempo work, whether you're doing that in the pool. If you're more jiu-jitsu athletes are going to probably benefit from running tempos, so that might be 60 to 80 yard runs, then with push-ups, short walk for recovery, and repeat. But for the most part, your rolling is going to develop the large part of your aerobic capacity, and then you want to find low-cost ways, biking, to develop the rest. So quickly on exercise selection for sport, there's three main things that you need to consider there. And this is jiu-jitsu, football, basketball, whatever it is. First, can the athlete do the exercise safely? So do they have good enough technique in it, and they're not risking getting injured in the weight room, which you always want to avoid. Second, can they produce a significant stimulus with the exercise? They're trying to, you're doing the exercise to become stronger. That's what you're in the weight room for. So if you can't move some decent weight, it's not gonna get the job done, and that's decent weight relative to your strength. And then how does it fit in the training plan? If you're 2 weeks out from a tournament and you're doing a lot of live training and rolling really hard with people, then it's probably not a great idea to compound on top of that, your hardest squatting and deadlifting with it. So you might want to choose exercise variations that actually don't lend themselves to quite as much overload at that point, or you just choose not to load them quite as heavily because that's not as high a priority. So take those three things into account, and check out Beers with Chad number 10, CWS and BJJ. And if you want that jiu-jitsu physical preparation manual, shoot me a message and I'll send that over to you. And Dr. Mike and I have also been talking about a bit more comprehensive work in regards to training for jiu-jitsu. So hopefully that gets you thinking in the right direction about all that training. Now, the last question we're going to talk about today comes from Captain McBackflips. I think that's a Scottish name.
It's
And he asked who he thought some of the top coaches are in powerlifting and weightlifting today. So before we talk about specific names of people, we kind of want to contextualize, what makes a good coach, or what makes a good coach in our eyes. So I'll let Max take it from here. Max, what are some of the qualities you think really makes a good coach besides being Jack Clark?
So this is actually a question I've been asked many times, and I think it's the best way I like to think about this is what coaches that I know would I be comfortable giving my athletes to? Meaning, if I was to theoretically not be able to coach anymore or moved on, who would I think is the best choice for those people to work with? And there's a few qualities that I think are important. Outside of obviously the sort of the specific knowledge of the sport and those kind of things, your actual ability as a coach. But one of them is the coach's ability to analyze the athlete properly. So being able to identify what somebody actually needs, being able to identify the sort of personality types in the athlete, those kind of things. A coach that is I would like to say somebody who's kind of an observer of sorts. What's that line from was a movie, The 4-Year-Old Virgin, where Seth Rogen says something like, "Well, I'm an observer. I'm a novelist." Anyways, the idea being that somebody who does a good job of observing athletes and observing people and can assess what's right and wrong and what needs to be done. And then also things like the ability to put precedent or put priorities in line properly. Is there a long-term approach? Is the coach somebody who looks at an athlete and says, okay, here's the things we're going to fix, here's the timeline, here's what's important. We're not going to focus on short-term goals. And then the other really big one for me is that those coaches are somebody who does things better than I consider myself to do, or better than I think I'm doing. Maybe they're a better motivator. Maybe they have a sense of, the technical rules or the sort of approach to the kind of persistence that it takes to be, to nickel and dime your way to a medal or those kind of things. So somebody who embodies the little things that maybe I don't think I'm doing as well. Those would be the top three kind of outside of just a general understanding of being a good weightlifting coach.
Yeah, like knowing what the technique looks like and,
exactly.
And how to make someone strong.
It's a given.
Yeah, I think to add on to that the ability to be flexible and adaptable is hugely important. That there's definitely very successful coaches across all different American sports, particularly when recruiting is a big component of things, who are fitting athletes into their system. Mm-hmm. And so you either have people who are able to choose the athletes that they work with and fit them into that system, or they're able to adapt the system around the athletes that they have. And not a powerlifting or weightlifting coach, but I think when you look at the success of someone like the Patriots and Bill Belichick, that they've had like these multiple different versions of their team, that it wasn't just as great as like a Nick Saban in Alabama is. He gets to pick all of his players every year, more or less, and get them to come on with scholarships. Not that NFL can do that to a degree, but not the same degree that college can. So he's had to change systems and adapt to the personnel he has available, and I think that's a sign of a really excellent coach. Maybe something where Bill Belichick isn't as good would be the next point, would be emotional intelligence. Motivation, inspiration. We've talked about that stuff before, and largely I think a lot of it is bullshit. But if you have a coach has a high emotional intelligence, and with that, they're able to better identify, what their athlete needs, when they need to be, maybe coddled a little bit, and when they need to be pushed harder, and that's going to set apart, good coaches and great coaches. And then I think finally, something that we definitely took away from our conversation with Jack Clark, one of the best coaches in the world at anything,
also the universe,
is having a system, a system of beliefs that you make your decisions through. So whatever your principles are, like when we're writing powerlifting and weightlifting programs, that scientific principles of strength training are in our mind all the time, and is it satisfying specificity and overload and all these things, and how does it fit into that context? But as you're making decisions as a coach, whether they're team management, team culture type of decisions, programming decisions, at like interaction with the athlete decisions there, and strategy and all that stuff, do they have a consistent set of guiding principles that they're adhering to with that? And I think integrity, the coach's integrity will be tied into that. So with all that said, and Max's idea of who would you be willing to give your athletes to, if one of us was sick or couldn't be at a competition or couldn't coach one of the athletes for a few weeks for some reason, who are some people that we could put our trust in? And this isn't a complete list. Probably, I'm sure there's people we left off. Who we do trust, and they just skipped our minds for powerlifting. Some people who stand out to me are Mike Tashir. Just a guy who puts a tremendous amount of thought into what he's doing. Constantly analyzing it, constantly, auditing what he's doing, trying to improve in every aspect possible. Thomas Lilly is a powerlifting coach out of Australia, probably the most prominent Australian powerlifting coach. Tons of strong lifters out there. He has great knowledge in program design and technique and nutrition and movement and rehab, and just a hard working guy. He was out here in the U.S. a couple weeks ago after the U.S. Open, just trying to go around talking to coaches and hone his craft. The guys over at TSA, the Strength Athlete, particularly Hani Jazzarelli and Eric Bodhorn, I think that they do a great job. The head coach for the Kabuki folks is Brandon Sen, and he's just consistently producing good lifters and helping people improve, whether they're more beginners or high level lifters. And I think there are some people who discount, when you coach high level lifters, how hard it is to get the last couple pounds or last couple kilos out of that. And in some ways, it's like, I'd liken it to a mechanic. You can be a good mechanic, and when someone brings their Honda Accord, to Jiffy Lube and needs a tune-up, someone who can do that consistently over and over, which is an important skill set, but a different skill set than the mechanic who works on the Formula One dragster to eke out the last 2 horsepower and cut 100th of a second off of something. So Max, what about the weightlifting coaches?
That's a great point. That's also something that's always in my mind when I think about these lists, is that I take 2 different values as I think through the coaches. And one of them is, if I was to take away their worst lifters and take away their single best lifter, what's left behind? And that gives me a good relative sense as to if the coach is, where the coach's abilities are. If they have a solid group of individuals that are consistently improving or have the qualities I'm looking for. And at the same time, the other thing would be to look at their absolute best, right? Who is the single best performer or performance that they've had? And those are important to understand those, because you can easily say, have a coach who doesn't have a lot of experience land a superstar stud athlete and not really know where they're getting, or you can have a coach who has a lot of not very skilled lifters and not really improving a lot. So you end up in a situation where it's difficult to say, just because they have a huge club or team doesn't make them a fantastic coach. But
or that they've just never had that one stallion come through. Right. But they have a lot of just people who their lifts look good and they're consistent.
Absolutely. So I would say on my list, I think not in any particular order, but Sean Waxman is definitely on there because he has a really good long-term plan, I believe. He definitely sets up the thought process for long-term planning with his athletes. And he has a system, and he applies a lot of those things we talk about, through that system. I would say also Kevin Doherty's on there. Kevin is, love him or hate him kind of guy. But I think he does a fantastic job of managing the entirety of a huge club and everything outside of the process of training. Kevin is the kind of guy who will, run around looking for scholarships for kids and grants and everything he can, get every single kid in the high school onto the team, and then, from that, flesh out, a few, top lifters. And it's a big picture perspective, which I think is really important. And then a couple other ones I think on there would be Kevin Simmons from Harrison Morris's coach. He also has a really big youth program and has a very good demeanor to me, I think, in the back and in overall sense. He's pretty straightforward and calm in those things. But also having some conversations with him, he has an open-mindedness that's important. When you don't know the answer to something or you don't really have you don't hide that. You don't shy away from the fact that maybe you have questions about something, despite having basically the most one of the most talented kids in the country.
And he strikes me too, especially with what he's doing with Harrison, that he's playing the long game.
Yes, very much so.
That he's not just trying to have, the guy who cleans the most at 18 years old ever.
Yeah.
But he's trying to make sure that training for an 18-year-old sets him up to be the best 19-year-old, 20-year-old, however long Harrison decides to weightlift.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the difference between a long-term approach or an exploitive mentality, right? Just get what you can out of somebody right now and then let it all sort of sort itself out later. Definitely not what he's doing. And then some other guys, probably honorable mentions on there that I've had contact with and obviously are friends that I think have done a good job and exude a lot of those qualities are Dan Brown in Indianapolis. He's got a big club. He's produced a lot of different people from different aspects of life. He's got some kind of regular folks coming in there getting to high levels. He has some talented people he's worked with, and he's taken a bunch of different people across different areas to pretty decent levels so far. Dane Miller, he's up in Pennsylvania. He's also very solid. I think his understanding of the training seems to be really competent. He's got a lot of good lifters coming up, and he's also another guy who's got like a big system kind of guy where you have a lot of people coming through, just generally looking really good as lifters and doing solid performances at these meets. He doesn't have one standout guy that's like, oh, killing it, and then everyone else is kind of dragging along. He's got a lot of people at a very good level.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was between Dan, Dane, and you at the Pan Am session at the Arnold. That was a third of the lifters. And I also appreciate with Dane that he's a thrower.
Yes.
He coaches throwers as well and does a great job there. I think he's just a guy who's hugely passionate about helping people succeed.
Yeah, that crossing over different sports I think is really, really important, especially in this current state with weightlifting where, drawing new people from areas like that is important. You're going to get different ideas, different thought processes going on. So I think he's great in that regard. And then obviously an old friend of mine, Yasha Fay, for any time if I was to send somebody to a meet and I wanted them to get the absolute most out of their abilities, Yasha has been one of those guys who can just can do that on the platform. And so, all of them, they all have different qualities here and there. I think same with Chad's list. These people are everyone's a little bit different in how they do things and approach it, but I think they all sort of fall into those same guidelines that we talked about.
Yeah, and with Yasha there, we have Jugglife episodes with Dan Brown, Yasha, Mike Tashir. Thomas has been on Beers with Chad, so go and check all those past episodes out. And I talk about this topic a little bit more as well on Beers with Chad number 13, Bad Influences. So maybe some of the people who wouldn't, I don't talk about any names in it, but people who maybe wouldn't be making the list. So that's it for the Q&A today. Upcoming events this weekend, we will be in Texas, recording episodes in Houston and the Dallas area, and then Jugglife Live Friday night at Arlington Strength. So there'll be a free squat clinic, and then recording an episode of the Jugglife. And then on Saturday afternoon, we'll do a free snatch clinic and Jugglife Live at D-Town CrossFit. On August 19th, we will be in Long Island, or on Long Island, I was told.
On Long Island, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're supposed to say.
Yeah.
Long Island.
Yeah. Well, whatever. I don't care how they want it. But for the Performance Summit, that's Max, myself, Dr. Quinn, Dr. Mike, and Dr. James, covering programming, technique, nutrition, recovery, and mobility. So really all the stuff you need to know to be good. You can sign up for all of those, and the Performance Summit also will get you CEUs through the NSCA. You can sign up for all of those under the events section at store.jtsstrength.com. If you love the Jugglife, go on iTunes and give us a 5-star review, like The Real Santa, who says that the content that JTS is producing is unquestionably the best overall content related to training on the market. It's always interesting and consistently delivered in a way that's engaging. And while there may be people out there that know just as much or are relaying some of the same info, there's no one with the high production value. Thanks to Shorty for all of that. The amount of care and time put into producing it is really evident from the opening credits, and the only other people doing that probably have $1 million production facilities. And the best part, it's all free. Plus, the Real Santa just signed up for our one-on-one online coaching and has been just as impressed with that as well. Keep doing what you're doing, guys. Thank you very much. And that's a celebrity endorsement.
That's got to be him.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a blue check mark on there? The Real Santa?
Yeah. So thank you to the Real Santa. Shoot me an email, chad@jtsstrength.com, and I'll send you a gift card or shirt or something like that.
Gift cards, Chad.
That's a good point.
Santa Claus.
Yeah. Just have your elf make you a Juggernaut shirt and Merry Christmas. So, if you like the Jugglife, go on there, write us something funny or nice. We always appreciate that, and it helps more people find the show. On YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube. Coming up on 200,000 subscribers, so thanks to everyone out there. 3, 4, sometimes 5 videos a week. Going to be filming a bunch of new stuff, really cool stuff that I'm excited about in the next few weeks. So be on the lookout for some new technique analysis videos and some really cool looking stuff. If you're interested in online coaching for powerlifting, weightlifting, super total, strongman, or power building from Max, myself, Marissa Inda, Andy Huang, Kristen Dunsmore, and Anthony Pomponio, check out juggernautcoaching.com, and we have programs available for all different levels of lifters. Max, where can they find you?
You can find me at the Poutine House. Oh, wait, no. You can find me on Instagram, Max_Ada, Facebook, or you can email me, max@jtsstrength.com.
All right. I'm Chad Wesley Smith, at Chad Wesley Smith, and at Juggernaut Training on Facebook and Instagram, filling up your news feed all day. Thanks for listening to the Jugglife. Look out for new episodes of Beers with Chad, and we'll see you next week.